All right, this is pretty damn epic and was a lot of fun to watch. But believe it or not, Piers Morgan finally took a break from former President Joe Biden to return to the present and dedicated an entire episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored to the topic of Elon Musk's public attacks on Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. And instead of the typical panel, it was just a 1v1 debate that Piers Morgan moderated between MAGA friendly businessman and Shark Tank co host Kevin O'Leary and Scott Galloway, a professor, an entrepreneur, a man who is an advocate for men's issues from a liberal perspective, and the co host of Raging Moderates with Jessica Tarlov, which you should definitely check out. Now, a lot of clips I'm going to show you, but I want to start with this one here because Piers Morgan tries to defend at the very end Donald Trump's ridiculous, slapdash, absurd tariff policy. And Scott Galloway just utterly dismantles it and leaves Piers Morgan speechless.
I think that Trump's style of leadership is chaotic by nature. I think probably quite often deliberately so. I mean, you said a very interesting thing recently on your podcast, your excellent podcast, The Pivot with Kara Swisher. You said that you'd gone from thinking Trump was incompetent on economics to saying, and this is your quote, I believe he's purposefully creating massive market volatility such that him and his insiders can make billions of dollars in market manipulation and insider trading. And that on his meme coin offer, you said this is arguably the biggest grift in modern history. I mean, it's a pretty striking thing to level at Trump, that he's creating all this global chaos purely for personal gain. Given that when I've interviewed him over the last 20 years, I can't think of a single interview where he's not mentioned A, the way that China, in his eyes, has been ripping off America, and B, that tariffs are not a very effective weapon to restore America's economic power. So it's not like this is the first time he's talked about this stuff, but you genuinely believe it's all just a way to make himself personally richer.
So it's so funny because, again, before Scott Galloway responds, it's frustrating that Piers Morgan pitches himself as a nonpartisan journalist, right? Not a political commentator like me who has his biases. And Donald Trump is president. And yet Piers Morgan has dedicated no episodes of Piers Morgan Uncensored to debating the merits of Trump's tariff policy to the extent that, Trump's corruption is involved. So, it's always like, well, what are the potential economic ramifications couched in other issues as well? But what about Trump's corruption? What about this sort of conversation? Like, Piers, imagine what you would be discussing if this were Hunter Biden, and maybe extend that level of ethical standard to the sitting president of the United States, even though he happens to be a buddy of yours. How about you dedicate an entire panel to Trump's corrupt incentives versus the tariff outcomes? How about that? So this is the closest that we've gotten so far. Here's how Scott responds.
Well, okay, so I'll acknowledge I suffer from Musk derangement syndrome. I also suffer from basic pattern recognition. He has taken tariffs up or down 50 times. 50 times, taking markets way up, way down. And the net effect, as far as I can tell, is one deal with the UK where we're getting some aerospace technology and Aston Martin engines for 10% tariff versus 15%. There has not been a single deal of any material value struck here. And then the morning that he announces huge tariffs that take the markets into one of their biggest one-day declines, his top cop, the Attorney General, sells her Donald Trump media stock. Zero-day options volume has been the days he takes a tariff up or down. Basically, insider trading laws are no longer in effect. When he can open a Swiss banking account in the form of a meme coin the Friday before his inauguration, and people can put money in or take money out, and nobody knows, and just 10 wallets made billions, while 70 or 80,000 lost billions in the subsequent weeks, we have a level of grift, insider trading, or what used to be considered insider trading, and market manipulation, the likes of which we haven't seen. So wouldn't he be stupid for him and his cronies? Autocracy is based on the following. You punish your enemies, you threaten lawsuits against them, you announce tariffs against them, and you make your allies billionaires. It seems like there's additional options trading and market participation right before he announces these tariffs going up or down, because the net effect for America so far has just been a damage in our reputation. They had to send out a letter the other day telling nations to come to the table. This guy is literally the worst poker player in the world. He announces a 145% tariff against China, and before they even respond, he reduces it to 30%. It's like showing up to a poker table, going all in with bluster, and then before anyone can respond, saying, I fold. The whole world is saying to America and the Trump administration regarding his sclerotic, reckless, and quite frankly, stupid tariffs, the same way Logan Roy responded to his children in succession. You are not a serious people. All of this has done is reduced our reputation and created incentive for other nations to reroute their supply chains around us. And there are discussions, but they're not happening between America. They're happening between Japan, South Korea, and China, who for the first time in decades are talking about economic agreements. I had dinner with the CEO of Alibaba in Europe, who is touring Europe and selling the Baba cloud into European companies who are working with AWS. Kevin, you want to see a reduction in the revenues of your small and medium-sized businesses? Let us continue to damage our reputation globally with a series of nonsensical tariffs, reductions, increases. Our brand, the US brand now means toxic uncertainty. No one knows how to plan their business against this man who goes up and down. So he's either stupid and doesn't understand economics, see above every tariff in history or every tariff policy, or he has decided, I know, I'll take the markets up and down and let the people close to me and who support me trade in this and make billions. I think that is what is going on.
Kevin?
Holy shit. I mean, Piers Morgan, if you've seen him on other interviews, other debates, he has no problem interrupting, interjecting, heckling, doing whatever. I mean, he's a very good debater when he wants to be. He's a very good debate host. He's a very good interviewer, and he knows how to do that British style of adversarial interview extremely well, like Mehdi Hassan, okay? Piers Morgan is no lightweight, but he was stunned. He had nothing to refute any of that. The obvious, unprecedented, blatant corruption of the Trump administration, which is objectively far worse and far greater than anything out of Biden, Obama, Clinton, probably than all of them combined. And Piers knows that. And he prefers Donald Trump because of their long-standing friendship. You know, he was on The Celebrity Apprentice, as he'll tell you in other episodes. You know, the fact that Trump has been good for Piers Morgan, and Piers Morgan is killing it on YouTube. This guy knows what to do. But he also knows he's smart. On the merits, Trump is inferior. Trump is intellectually and morally inferior to any Democrat, and Piers knows it. So when you have somebody like Scott Galloway, who's able to make the case and not do it bombastically. You know, if I were on there and others are on there, you know, we tend to get heated and bombastic, and, you know, it's fun. But Scott Galloway is just, man, he's cool as a cucumber, man. He is. And maybe that helped make the delivery of that so persuasive. But Piers was speechless. He's got nothing. He desperately wants to defend Trump, but knows he can't, because you can say, as Piers and others do, as Kevin O'Leary does, listen, just have faith. The tariffs will work out in the end. Maybe they will. It's extremely unlikely. I would say absurdly improbable. But you know what? Maybe a miracle will happen, and there will be some tangible benefit to the American people as a consequence of those tariffs. Now, I would argue that doesn't give Donald Trump a full win. It's kind of like when Musk says he's going to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget, and then he downgrades it to $1 trillion, and then his final book report is, you know, like $150 billion. That's not a victory. Musk has objectively failed because he set the goal at $2 trillion. He's orders of magnitude lower. So that's a failure. And I'm not going to give him credit for that, nor should you, because you wouldn't if it were a Democrat. Likewise, unless Trump actually gets all the shit that he said that the tariffs would bring, he has failed. So it's virtually impossible. But you know what? Let's say that there are some victories here. There's no evidence of those victories now. It's an article of religious faith to say that Donald Trump is winning the tariff war, or that the tariffs are working. An honest person, an honest Trump supporter would say, I believe for XYZ reason that in the end it will work out for Trump. But I must admit the indicators thus far do not support that conclusion. That's an honest Trump supporting assessment of the situation. That is the most honest a Trump supporter can be under the current situation. Anyone who says it's working, fucking liar. They're either morons or they're liars. One of the two. That's the situation, unfortunately, where Piers finds himself, because he's not a moron. And in this point, he doesn't want to lie or can't lie in the face of Scott, probably thinking, damn, even if I wanted to try to spin this, Scott Galloway is just going to kick my ass rhetorically. Trump, his tariff policy has been a failure. Maybe that'll change, but there are no indications that it will. And right now, Trump's critics are winning the argument, which is reflected in the polls on this issue. Trump is losing. The anti-Trump forces are winning, period. End of story. Then Trump's corruption. This is also, again, something that needs to be talked about, especially from people like Kevin O'Leary, if you see him on his CNN debate panels when he shows up on Abby Phillips' show, and certainly Piers Morgan. If you have a lot to say about Hunter Biden, if you have a lot to say about a man who was never president of the United States or a member of the Biden administration, but you don't have any smoke for Donald Trump, who is the president, you've missed the point. I subscribe to the Uncle Ben from Spider-Man school of philosophy, okay, which says with great power comes great responsibility. Hunter Biden had no power. He had a lot of privilege, but no power. He wasn't a government employee. He wasn't a senior White House staffer the way that Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter, was, or Jared Kushner, Ivanka's husband, Trump's son-in-law, was. And they benefited personally, financially, lucratively from their time in the Trump administration. Trademarks and patents for Ivanka, objectively far more corrupt than anything attributed to Hunter Biden. And Jared Kushner, who was basically the shadow Secretary of State, as soon as he leaves office, he gets a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia that was so absurdly unjustified on the merits that the managers of the Royal Sovereign Fund, the people that the Saudi royal family, the Crown Prince's royal family has empowered, like, hey, listen, you guys are the experts, you manage this. And they come back and they're like, hey, listen, it'd be really stupid to invest with Jared Kushner. There's nothing about this on paper that merits that sort of investment. He doesn't have the experience or the expertise. It's a bad investment. He has to overrule them. The very people that he trusted with his, that's how absurdly facially corrupt it is. So when people say, well, Jared Kushner is a businessman. If he were a businessman, then the Saudi, if even if we accepted that argument at face value, which again is absurd, but if the argument is, oh, Jared Kushner, that makes sense. He's a businessman, right? Well, if he were a businessman in the relevant fields and was good at what he did, then the managers of the sovereign royal fund, the wealth fund, would not have advised the Crown Prince not to make that deal. They would have been, oh, hell yeah, it makes sense. Jared Kushner is obviously an experienced, relevant businessman. You should make that deal. The Trump family is just objectively 10 times, 100 times, 10,000 times more corrupt than the Biden family. People like Piers Morgan know that. Deep down, they know that. And they know they will always lose the debate on corruption. Biden versus Trump. Hunter Biden versus Jared Kushner or Don Jr. or Eric or Ivanka. And so they have to grade Trump on a curve. And what you just saw from Scott Galloway, I mean, there are other things. We'll probably have to do a separate video about this, but even just rewatching this, like all the other clips I was going to show you, because most of the conversation was about Elon Musk. So I'm probably going to do it in a separate video, maybe tonight or tomorrow. But that was stunning. That was just stunning. And you could see it on Piers Morgan's face. He's stunned too. So he instantly turns and asks a separate question to Kevin O'Leary, the guy who is famous for interjecting and say, no, you've got that wrong, or no, that's bad faith, or what about this? A guy who is very skilled at playing the devil's advocate knows he's got nothing, despite his deep personal affection for Donald Trump. And that's not enough. I love that. You guys should definitely check this out. And again, we'll probably do a separate video. I had so many other clips lined up, but I got on my soapbox there because that was really impressive and really effective. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.